Hello, Maya fans, and welcome back to Maya Rockstars. And this is the second series of using Maya. So, in this section of Maya, we're going to just go into a little bit further into what you can do with primitives. So far, we've only created primitives and or scaled them, move them around, put lighting on them, put texturing on them, and now we'll look at really what the components of what a primitive shape has in it. So we'll start looking at what a Nurbs surface has. So let's go ahead and say we're going to go ahead and create the sphere, which we've been doing a whole lot. I'll go ahead and zoom in there. So I just hit F to frame that object. When you hit F, it kind of just zooms in and frames in the selected object. So you'll notice here, here's my sphere. When I click on it, we see the spans, and if we look at our Make Nurbs tab over here, we can see that we can change those sections and spans. So this is what we call history. When we create objects, they always have history on them. So we can take a look at what a Nurb shape is. Now, Nurb shapes they're not really enclosed. They're always open on one end or the other, or both really. And so what we see here is, if we look at our start and end sweep, you'll notice that we can open that up. So we can see what's inside of the Nurb by opening up the start sweep or opening up the end sweep. So you can see what's actually inside there. The spans and sections stay the same. It's just that those are going to be closer together when I change that. So you'll notice if you go too far, you're not going to have a visible shape, and then you'll get this error message down here. So you want to stay within that shape, because when Maya can't draw the objects, it'll generate an error like that. But let's go back to really the shape of this. So you can think of this as a globe when you see sections or spans on the creation of an object. So before we delete history on an object, and I'm just going to go into selection mode here. So if you change the spans, so the spans you can think of, if you look at a globe, right, you have longitudinal lines. So those spans are or the sections are the longitudinal lines, and the spans are the latitude, right? So those are the different shapes there. Now, the other thing you can do is change the radius of this object. So if I go to change the radius, you see the object is scaling up. Now, if we look at our size, so if I change from my Make Nurbs tab here to my Nurbs Sphere 1, so you'll see that even though I scaled up the radius of the object, the scale of the object is still 1. So this is your relative reset size. So let's say that, I decided I changed the radius this big, and then I go back, and let's say I go to my scale tool and scale this guy small, right? But I want to go, and let's say I go back to my Make Nerb Sphere, and I change that scale back to 1. And I type in 1 on all axes. So it's going to go back. That radius value then is the reset value. So I want you to try just kind of playing with some different Nurbs shapes here and seeing what it's like, what the different options are for the make shape, for the Make Nurbs objects are. So if you look at, for example, a cylinder here, you'll notice with the Make Nurbs cylinder, you also have things like start and end sweep, right? So you have start and end sweep. So again, it's sort of like this container that is swept around. It's what we call a sweep, right? Or a lathe. We rotate a shape around an axis to create an object. Same thing with the radius. So the radius is really going to be this circle here, and how big that cylinder is. You have same thing with spans here, right? You have spans and sections. So the same as on the globe, longitude and latitude type lines. And then you have another additional thing on the cylinder here called height ratio. So if you change the height ratio, so that's going to be relative to the radius of this, that height ratio will make this sort of a longer, skinnier cylinder. You can get a similar effect with scaling it, right, or making it longer but the difference is that, you know, this is actually affecting the scale of the object, whereas when we do it with the make NURB sphere, that's basically our reset value size. So here I'm doing like a non-proportional scale. See, so the object, if I wanted to change this back and scale it uniformly, I'm going to have to go and make all these numbers the same. But it's easier if I get my scale properly, if I have that ratio set first, then I don't have to worry about always proportionally scaling it because, or non-proportionally scaling it to get that length. Okay, so let's look at one last thing here. We'll go into the NURBS primitive, and let's take a look at the torus. So the torus also has something similar settings. If you look at the make NURBS option, so again, you have spans and sections, and so that's going to affect the amount of geometry that's drawn here. If you look at start and end sweep, you're making like a piece of macaroni, right? So you can kind of start and end that sweep. So it's basically taking a circle and sweeping it around the y-axis here. And then you have the spans. So we have below the spans and sections, you have height ratio. And so you have this. So you see you can turn it from a piece of macaroni to almost like a piece of string if that ratio is different. Okay.